Just like a coin, there's both two sides to a coin, and there's two sides to war, the good and the bad of it. And I have many memories that reside in my gray matter, and some are not good. But I can remember this one incident that we worked around a lot of special forces camps. And we were around this one special forces camp, and this young mountain yard boy came over to us. And Doc came over, meaning our medic, and this young kid had been bitten by a dog. So Doc was working on, I don't remember where he was bitten, but Doc was working on the wound. And the big thing back then was an antibiotic. And so Doc gives this to this kid, this mountain yard kid, to take this antibiotic, trying to explain to him when to take it. And I felt that Doc wasn't getting anywhere, so I intercede, and I'm telling to him, look, when the sun comes up, you're to take a pill. When the sun goes down, you're to take a pill. Okay? And I don't know how many times I said that. But then the youngster ended up saying, oh, you want me to take it in the morning and at night? And I mean, that just shocked me that this little guy could speak English. You know, and here Doc and I were making a fool out of ourselves. And I thought that was great. It's a memory that I won't forget.
According to legend, Vietnam on the far-off Indochina Peninsula had its origin in a peaceful union between two mythical beings representing the sea and mountains. But in reality, Vietnam's history has been one of constant struggle for self-government. After 1,000 years, Chinese domination was thrown off in the 9th century, but was followed by French rule in the late 19th century. After World War II, groups opposed to French rule revolted, and the country was divided into two zones: North Vietnam under a communist government and South Vietnam, headed by anti-communists. Over the next 20 years, the United States supported the South in its struggle to defeat insurgents led by the North, which opposed unification of the country. In 1973, the United States withdrew its combat troops, and 2 years later, South Vietnam fell to a communist offensive. A unified communist state was established in 1976. During its involvement in the Vietnam War, the United States Air Force provided air support in the dense jungle terrain. One of its missions was to destroy the supply lines of the enemy that originated in the north. As a result, millions of gallons of herbicide such as Agent Orange were dropped to destroy trees and plants that gave the enemy cover. It was believed that these herbicides were not directly intended to harm humans or animals. However, veterans of the Vietnam War suffered several health problems, among them rare forms of cancer. Over 10 years ago, the United States Congress declared America owed a debt to its Vietnam veterans and their loved ones as a result of defoliants such as Agent Orange. These are the stories of some of those brave souls.
Well, I was a spoiled little brat. I had a wonderful childhood, wonderful parents, and just had everything I wanted.
Before Vietnam, were you going to college? Or?
No, I graduated high school at 16. I got skipped.
And where were you working?
And then I was working for a machine shop.
And then my next question is, when and why were you sent to Vietnam? Was it the draft or?
It was a draft, but I volunteered because I was an only child. And I didn't have to go.
When you volunteered, did you go directly to Vietnam?
Yes.
You went directly to Vietnam at that point in time?
Mm-hmm.
And what year did you volunteer?
68.
68?
Yes.
So then you went to basic training and
AIT.
and AIT. And what was your MOS?
11 Bravo.
11 Bravo? And then you went directly over to Vietnam?
Yes.
I had already served my military time in Europe, and I was stationed in Germany with the 3rd Infantry Division. And I got out and served my time. So at home, I was registered to start college in the fall, and I picked up a job locally, tending bar.
When and why were you sent to Vietnam?
Well, let me answer why first. And so while I was home, I learned that the Army offered a 15-month tour specifically to go to Vietnam. And I questioned that and made sure that it was a 15-month tour, and I found that it was. And so I signed up, completed all the necessary paperwork, and this was in the spring of '67. And by May or June of '67, I received my orders, and the fact that I was going to the 4th Infantry Division and that I was to report to Fort Dix, New Jersey on a specific date.
During the Vietnam War, the United States utilized herbicides to eliminate enemy hiding positions, curtail crop production, and clear land for defense purposes. The 4-inch wide colored bands painted on the 55-gallon drums containing the different chemicals identified the defoliants: Agent Green, Agent Pink, Agent Purple, Agent Blue, Agent White, and Agent Orange, with Agent Orange being the most widely used among the defoliants sprayed. In 1961, the South Vietnam Air Force first sprayed and tested herbicides, and in 1962, President Kennedy approved American military involvement. The overall herbicide program was codenamed Operation Trail Dust. The United States Air Force conducted much of the spraying with C-123 cargo transport planes under the codename Operation Ranch Hand. Herbicides were also sprayed by helicopters, river boats, land vehicles, and soldiers on the ground. Spraying of these herbicides continued to increase, with an estimated 14 million gallons being sprayed during the peak years 1967 through 1969. However, in 1971, President Nixon bowed to pressure from the scientific community to halt the program. In total, it's estimated that approximately 20 million gallons of herbicides were sprayed in Vietnam. 12 million gallons were Agent Orange. Vietnam veterans recount stories of living in such areas, eating, drinking water, sleeping, and being sprayed on.
While in Vietnam, did the military or any other agency inform you about the purpose of Agent Orange?
No.
When I use the term Agent Orange, also we're using about the foliant. Did any agency or any individual that you were talking about, did they talk anything to you about Agent Orange while in Vietnam?
Well, we talked amongst ourselves about it, but that was about it.
What was said amongst yourselves?
That it just gets sprayed on you. You got to be careful.
Could you just explain to us how you were exposed to Agent Orange while in Vietnam?
See, we were in a special unit on the 4th Infantry Division called First Field Forces Air Mobile, and we used to be the first to go in case anything happened. And a few occasions when we left, they were still spraying on us when we were jumping out of helicopters.
Do you remember any instances or any other time that you go into any locations and you saw the defoliant had been sprayed?
Yes.
Or what was when you saw these locations, what was it like? Or
they were soaking wet. They got on your skin. They got all over you. And at that time, you didn't think nothing of it. But that's how it was.
While in Vietnam, did the military or any other agency inform you about the purpose of Agent Orange?
No. I learned about, I guess it was, we called it Agent Orange. That really doesn't stick in my mind. And the only way I learned about it was from the guys. And I can remember one fire base we were at that it was sprayed, and then I can remember coming across this vast area that had been sprayed, and the results were just breathtaking, because all the trees were there and they all looked like they had gone through a forest fire, but were able to stand, and there was no foliage at all. And when we came upon that, everybody knew that we had come upon one of those areas that had been sprayed. And again, it doesn't stick in my mind that we all said Agent Orange, but we knew it was a defoliant that was being used.
Could you explain to us how you were exposed to Agent Orange while in Vietnam?
It was the spraying at this fire base west of Pleiku with the Huey helicopter. I can remember that specifically, and I can see that. And then in that area, as I described, that we came upon, me being at that time 22 years old, and saying, okay, we come upon this area, we got to do our thing. And so I took some of these twigs from that area and I said, wow, look at this, you know, I don't have to strip off the foliage. And so I'd put them in my mouth and chew on them while we're strolling along. And I can't begin to tell you how many times we would fill our canteens from streams, as well as bathe in them. So I believe that's where one of those, or all of them, is where I was exposed to Agent Orange.
Agent Orange is an equal mixture of two chemicals, dichlorophenoxyacetic acid, or 2,4-D, and trichlorophenoxyacetic acid, 2,4,5-T. In the creation of 2,4,5-T, an unintentional and harmful byproduct is created, TCDD, or 2,3,7,8, tetrachlorodibenzoparodiazine. It is the chemical TCDD that's at the center of the debate surrounding this issue. It's also believed to be responsible for inflicting pain, suffering, and death on our veterans. On August 18, 2004, South Mississippi Sun-Herald newspaper printed an article by Greg Harmon entitled, Agent Orange Report Criticized. It stated in part, quote, "The Mississippi Department of Environmental Quality Water Quality Criteria for Human Health has a limit of 1 part per quadrillion for TCDD in state waters, which is the equivalent of a single human hair from among all the human hairs on the planet." End quote. The average TCDD levels in Agent Orange barrels were at 13 parts per million, with some reported instances of TCDD being at 50 parts per million. In 1991, the United States Congress passed the Agent Orange Act. It gave Vietnam veterans the reason to believe that the spraying of herbicides during the Vietnam War caused specific diseases. Meanwhile, the Department of Veterans Affairs has declared that Vietnam veterans will be compensated for any of the following conditions: chloracne, which must occur within 1 year of exposure; porphyria cutanea tarda, which must also occur within 1 year of exposure; non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, Hodgkin's disease, soft tissue sarcoma, multiple myeloma, respiratory cancers including cancers of the lung, larynx, trachea, and bronchus, prostate cancer, acute and subacute transient peripheral neuropathy, which must occur within 1 year of exposure and be resolved within 2 years of date of onset, type 2 diabetes, and chronic lymphocytic leukemia. In addition, the following conditions for children of Vietnam veterans will be compensated: spina bifida and certain other birth defects in the children of women of Vietnam veterans.
Of your illnesses that you have, which ones does the VA acknowledge as a result from contact from Agent Orange?
The tenofovir.
Chloracne, I believe it's called.
Yeah.
Could you just go over the illnesses or injuries that you're being compensated for by the VA?
Yeah, being compensated for that. I'm being compensated for PTSD. I'm being compensated for wounds and scars.
And what are the percentages of each?
The wounds are 20%. The tenofovir is 30%. The PTSD is 70%.
And in the wounds that you received in Vietnam, what kind of wounds were there? Was it, what was the incident that occurred for you to receive the wounds?
I was in a foxhole with 2 other guys, and a mortar landed right in the foxhole. Killed them 2 guys and left me with my hip.
And that's what spent 1.5 years in the
Yeah.
hospital afterwards
Yeah.
to get rehabilitation to that. What do you think has affected you because of the exposure to Agent Orange? Is it the skin that you realize that's affecting you because of the Agent Orange?
Yeah. Skin.
You heat up inside.
I heat up inside.
Feels like you're on fire. He feels like he's on fire inside, internally, and it depends also. Alcohol will make it flare up. He likes his beers, but he's got to cut down. He gets hollered at all the time. And he likes to sit in the sun, and he can only go in the sun for short periods of time, 10-minute intervals, 12, 15 minutes. He's got to come in because the rash spreads and it raises up off of the flesh, and it becomes very uncomfortable all over the body.
And when you mean the rash, I'm sorry, can you explain to us what you mean by the rash?
Yeah, it's like
prickly heat, but it also gets bigger, like continents on the body. It spreads out in different shapes, and it raises and it gets scaly. And also around Tony's neck and head, he gets very scaly, and we have to keep using creams and moisturizing soap. So it looks like he has dandruff on his skin, and it comes all over his clothes. It looks like snow all the time. So we have to moisturize him. And then also he's got on his fingers and toes, he's got a fungus that rots the nail bed and the nail, and it raises up. And he needs medication for that also. And it's very painful because it hurts into the bone, he said.
This right here that you're describing right here, Tony, and both of you, is before you went to the VA and got the compensation for it, before the VA gave you compensation,
Right.
and this was brought to the light of the VA, when were you seeing these problems? When do you remember back
Oh. That's a tough one. The skin raising up, I say a good 6 years, at least.
Oh, I know you 7 or 8 years, and it's since then.
Since then. Maybe a good 10 years.
When did you get compensation from the VA, or when did that occur? How
That
many years
occurred
for the Agent Orange?
for the Agent Orange. That happened. I got compensated right from getting out of Vietnam.
Was that for the Agent Orange side, or was that from the disability?
Disability, well, they called it Jungle Ride at the
Was it
time.
Jungle Ride at the time?
Yeah. They didn't say it was Agent Orange.
With your disability with the Agent Orange, with the disorder that you were just describing in the condition act, how has it affected your life and both of your lives? And in many ways, I mean, what are the ways it's affected you?
Well, I don't want to go out half the time.
He doesn't feel good a lot of the time, and he doesn't know why. The heat, if it's very hot out, he becomes very irritable, and like we said, he becomes inflamed inside. And the itching, sometimes he'll scratch his skin until it bleeds, and he'll have little sores all over. And the main thing is just to try and keep him cool. He loves the beach, he loves to sit at the pool, and we're very limited. We go and we have to come home right away, or it's easier just to go in and outside of the house because it's too aggravating to pack up, go to the beach, and only stay there for 10 minutes because we love to take a drive up to the beach, and we don't really put a blanket down. We sit on the railing on the beach because he's very uncomfortable and we can't stay that long. So if we go to the beach, we go when it's cooler in the evenings, and our time is limited, our life is limited. It's not only that, it's the heat of the day, or if a store is too hot, he's uncomfortable, we have to leave. Temperature plays a big role in Tony's life.
Well, Gladys puts up with a lot. I'll tell you that.
Gladys, is there? No.
It's very emotional. I don't know how to put it in words. Life could be much better, but these are the cards we're dealt.
After Vietnam, and before you became aware of your illness, what was your life like?
Well, when I came home from Vietnam, I was a staunch supporter for President Nixon and for the cause. And I really, truly put it aside, so to speak, the whole experience. I really didn't make a point of sitting down and talking with my family or sitting down with my buddies that I came home to, and we'd be talking, and I never brought it up. If it was brought up, I would be very limited as to what I was going to contribute to the conversation of it. And many a times I would excuse myself because I didn't want to talk about it. And So basically, I got on with my life. I met my wife to be, and we got married in 1969, and we raised 3 boys. And it was probably the mid-'80s that all of a sudden I wanted questions answered. And I don't believe there was one thing that stimulated that, but I wanted to get my hands on everything that I could read about Vietnam, certainly specifically about my unit, where it went after I left. And that from the mid-'80s to probably to the mid-'90s, that progressed to the point where I had collected quite an assortment of books and material dealing with Vietnam, and dealing with it from all different viewpoints, dealing with it from the aspects of it from the mid-'60s through the early '70s when America left Vietnam. And I had learned about, at that time, about Agent Orange, but, and I say that time, probably in the early '90s, and it was at that time that the Veterans Affairs was very reluctant to accept responsibility for the effects of Agent Orange. So there was a confrontation going on between veterans groups and or the individuals. And I really never paid much attention to it. And in March of 2000, my wife and I were getting ready to go on a trip, and my wife told me that I need to have an annual physical, which I did. And at that time, my civilian doctor made me aware that my PSA was elevated, which I didn't think much about. And he told me I'd have to go to the urologist. So I went to a urologist, and through everything we had to do, in March of 2000, I was told that I had prostate cancer, which absolutely took the wind right out of my sails, and I know my wife's sails as well. And simultaneously, I broke down and I said, hey, why don't I go in and take this Agent Orange examination, get myself on the books for whatever reason. And I did. And that examination consisted of 2 main parts. That one day you would go in and do various things, x-rays, blood, and then a matter of so many days thereafter, you would be seen by a doctor, and he would discuss the results of those, as well as you had to fill out a form as to where you were when in Vietnam, of which he took from me. And at that time, he too told me that my PSA was elevated. And I was able to tell him, Doctor, I know, and I have been identified, I've been told that I have cancer. So it was April of 2000 that I had made a decision to have an operation to have the cancerous prostate removed. And I wanted it removed because I wanted it out of my body. I didn't want that disease in my body. And there are many options that you can consider with prostate cancer. But my option, and my wife and I, we decided that I wanted it out. So in April of 2000, I had an operation to remove my prostate. And after it was removed, I went through the normal period of time for recovery. And after the operation, you still have to have a PSA to see where it stands. And very shortly after the operation, my PSA came back, meaning that they didn't get all the cancer. So I met with my urologist, and he told me you can either do this or not. And he says, but you need to have radiation. And of course, I said, let's go for it, Doc. And so he hooked me up with a doctor of radiation oncology, and that course of action consisted of 33 sessions, Monday through Friday, of radiation, of which towards the end of that, I did not tolerate it very well, and it was very debilitating. And then after the radiation, my doctor told me that because of the grade of my cancer, and they grade your cancer, okay? And my cancer, out of a 10, 10 being the worst, was graded a 9. So with that in mind, my urologist and oncologist recommended that I go on a drug that chemically stops the production of testosterone. And because testosterone is what prostate cancer grows from, and so by taking this shot, which lasted 3 months, so every 3 months I would get a shot, and hence my testosterone was lowered, and it's dealing with hormones of your body. And some of the cancer is sensitive to hormone treatment. Some of the cancer is not, it's insensitive. So I tolerated the shots, and this specifically was called Zoladex, for about 1.5 years. And not only tolerated the shot and the effects of, but you knew every 3 months you had to go get a shot, so you knew you had to be next to or close to a military installation to get it done. And it was just something that, to me, after I learned about another option, I made a decision to go the other option. And I had done what was called an orchiectomy. And that's by medical terms. So I had my testicles removed. And so what that did is, that's the gold standard that the medical community goes by as far as stopping the production of testosterone. And so it was January of 2003 that I had my testicles removed. And it was a hard decision, but my oncologist told me that I would have to remain on the shots for the rest of my life. And so my wife and I, we made this decision. It was a hard decision, and certainly from a manly standpoint, let alone psychologically. So today, I'm monitored every 3 months by the various departments to keep an eye on as to where the cancer's at.
Of the illnesses that you have, which ones did the VA acknowledge are a result from your contact with Agent Orange?
Well, they acknowledged the prostate cancer, and I don't know how long that had been on their approved lists, so to speak, but I did not know that. I did not know that, but it was really when I had that Agent Orange exam that the doctor said, you know, you can be compensated for this. And so, being ignorant of that, my wife and I pursued that avenue.
Is there any other illnesses that you have, or medical problems that you may have that are a result from Agent Orange?
Well, I have neuropathy, peripheral neuropathy, in various parts of my body as a result of Agent Orange.
Can you explain that, please?
It's the numbness in the parts of my limbs that have been brought on because of that. There is no factual medical documentation, but I have severe joint pain, and I have to take steroid shots and to help that. It doesn't eradicate it, but it does keep it under control. And certainly my mind is of, you know, Agent Orange. And I was 54 years old when all this started. So
there are over 58,000 names engraved on a granite wall in Washington, D.C. That wall recognizes the ultimate sacrifice these soldiers made for their country. The National Park Service also maintains a registry of names of soldiers who lost their last battle, the battle with Agent Orange.